Welcome to the Soft Rebellion podcast, a homecoming, a return, and a rediscovery of the creative power of your female body, your menstruating body, your body with a womb. Our world uproots us from the gifts of the feminine, the intuitive, the instinctual, the cyclical, the soft. What's the result? Patriarchal cultures of perfectionism, shame, and disconnect that leave us constantly running, never arriving. Imagine a world of women and menstruators softly rebelling, claiming our cyclicity, our weirdness, and our rest as we courageously cultivate a deep and delicious relationship to our menstruating bodies. My name is Florina. I'm a UK-based dancer, writer, osteopath, and holistic pelvic care practitioner, currently writing a PhD about return to the menstruating body through somatic dance practices. I've been on my own journey sparked by an eating surge to come home to the wild, poetic anatomy of my female body and awaken my creative power. And I invite you to join me and my guests, trailblazing teachers, healers, and creatives as we each reclaim our own soft rebellion. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Soft Rebellion. What if descent wasn't something to fear, but a sacred invitation to soften, to surrender, to remember who we truly are beneath the noise? This conversation with Carly Mountain felt like sitting beside a fire, slowly warming the parts of ourselves we've hidden away. With tenderness and deep wisdom, Carly guides us into the mythic, sensual, and often forgotten terrain of the body, of feminine cycles of descent and rising. This is a conversation about remembering, not just with the mind, but with the whole body. It stayed with me long after we stopped recording, and I hope it touches you too. So, you guessed it, today's guest is the wonderful Carly Mountain. She's a writer, the author of the book Descent and Rising, psychotherapist and initiatory guide. She facilitates women and the people who love them to remember, reclaim and reconnect with their sensual, emotional, embodied aliveness and instinctual knowing that is rooted in the earth. She draws on 20 years of embodied practice, training and space holding, and has a trauma-informed approach. What is left to say? Nothing! But yeah, let's dive in and enjoy this incredible conversation with miraculous Carly Mountain. Warm welcome, Carly, on the Soft Rebellion podcast. Welcome in the space of the Soft Rebellion.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I've always, before a conversation, I do a long morning walk and I just kind of feel or tune into again what does this conversation mean to me, or why did I keep nudging you to have this conversation? And I felt quite just very touched, because I noticed the big thing was gratefulness. I feel so grateful to have this conversation with you. And I also felt like, really from the very beginning, we just tap a little bit into that amazing book you've written. And I just from the very beginning also want to encourage and somehow I want to urge all of the listeners to read your book, Descent and Rising. Because when I read your book, so you have that German expression, it felt like scales fell from my eyes, like a fish scales. And it brought this so deep understanding about the nature of my nature, of being woman, of inhabiting a female body. And yeah, I had two big aha moments on my homecoming journey, and exploring Descent and Rising was one of them. The first one was when I uncovered the spiritual hunger underneath, starving my body with my physical hunger. That was my first gosh, finally someone can put that into words.
Mhm.
And then when I read Descent and Rising, and I find that so beautiful because it's so deeply, it's a pattern or a map. It's something which is so deeply in the core of all my cells. It's like it can instantly kind of awaken or change something.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah, it was especially over the last, I guess, literally the last year when I really read it back and forth and read and listened. Also enjoyed listening to your voice. And I felt, gosh, talking about homecoming is talking about descent and rising, right? I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So it's unnegotiable not to have this conversation with you.
Mm,
Hmm.
mm.
Thank you,
Oh,
Carly.
you're so welcome. And I love that phrase that you said, the nature of my nature.
Yeah, the nature of my nature.
How beautiful. I mean, that to me is homecoming,
Hmm.
coming home to the nature of your nature.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you so much for
Hmm.
being so enthusiastic and heartful about it, because I think this book was part of my own descent and rising, and there is a risk that we take when we become naked and we become more visible, and there's we risk being misunderstood and rejected. And so when people resonate and go, oh, that's in my cells too, it's like, there's something very settling about that for me. And I think this is how our creativity is our own medicine first, actually. It's like rising through this book has given me a community that I was really longing for, that I didn't even know was going to come with the book. I wrote the book, I think, primarily for my own soul, but what is my soul? It's part of the bigger soul. It's part of the nature of my nature, which is nature itself, perhaps. So when you start really moving from that depth, which descent takes you to, you gather other people who are in the same cellular resonance as you. And actually, that deep wound, the abandonment wound that probably we descend to, what do you call it, like clear out, tend to put salve on, is met in a whole new way. But of course, we don't know that. We have to take the risk and see what comes. So it's real medicine to me still. Every single day that I get a message from people, and I do get a message from people most days, which is just a miracle to me. Yeah, it's real balm for me, and I really hear from others that it's balm for them too. So thank you for, naming it the way you did. It's just so gorgeous.
You just said something so beautiful there, how, and it's interesting when I spoke with Pippa Grace, I'm sure you know, she talked about we have to follow that, our needs to be creative. And I it just somehow
Yeah.
I thought about that now because you said, wow, gosh, yeah, if I follow this need and I take the risk, even if it's a step into the unknown, and I don't
Mm.
know, but also I will kind of feed that an energy or a vibrancy or something, a frequency, that's what I was looking, a frequency which other beings, women can kind of align to or start to swing and move with me. So actually my
Yes.
own container gets bigger through me
Yes.
stripping naked. Yeah.
Yeah.
It, in a way paradox, but so yeah, so mystical.
Yeah, my own
Oh.
container gets bigger. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And then, so much beauty flows in there.
Yeah, and then shortly after, I thought I'm going to share it also right in the beginning. After I think I invited you the first time, you wrote this so good Instagram post, and you wrote about dissociation and the horrendous time we're living in, and how this is partly a survival strategy. But it boiled down to that you said, yes, coming home to your body is an act of rebellion, but don't do it for that, do it for you. And I
Yes.
thought, wow, the doing for me part, that is the soft part, you know? It's not
Yes.
rebelling against, it's the soft rebellion for me, for a new world in
Mm.
me, for first and foremost, and then around. But I just had
Hmm.
this mind, I was like, ah, yeah, she names what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you articulate that so beautifully. The soft rebellion is the one for me. You're not
Mm-hmm.
doing it to push against the other, but by being you, sometimes you do push against the other simply by being who you are, not because you're trying to push against.
Exactly, because if I do it for me, then it will bring lots of, I want to say no's, like all the no's, the things which are no longer me, right? All the suits or the
Yeah.
clothes. I find that such a have image which, oh, I actually feel too tight.
Yeah.
I start to softly push against also.
Mm. Mm. And it
Mm.
makes me think of, like the Tai Chi masters and that kind of very martial artist kind of soft but sturdy. So that sense of the more grounded, the more rooted we are. We don't have to do a brittle push this way like this. If we just stay really firmly rooted, we can't be pushed over because we're so rooted. So it has to be soft, I think, but it's not that soft is weak, right? It's that the softness has depth and it has meat on its bones that allows it to be very solid and soft at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the rootedness, and when you say roots, now I really
Mm.
think and feel descent. It's so beautiful. I said that now reading your book has really it's just I'm so grateful because it's such an ancient map. It made me very curious.
Yes.
Wow, what does that really physically mean? My thing is
Mm.
the wild and poetic anatomy of the female body. So
Mm.
it inspired me to really start to explore that very physical map, very, very physical
Mm.
through muscles and bones and wings
Yeah.
and also which is about descending into that physical, wild and poetic nature of my anatomy. It is all about arriving with that grounding cord with my roots.
Yes.
And yeah, so um, I would I would love to tap more into that, and I would really love to use this time with you to explore this ancient map of descent and rising, which is in all of us, and to explore. I was trying to find what is the right word, how we can open up, how we can meet this, because of course it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
If it's not, but maybe it's more about how can we meet that more consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, you mentioned your story already, and maybe we can start with your story or parts or a part of your story behind
Mm-hmm.
you discovering this map and then writing this so urgent book and flow in or integrate the Inanna Richka story. I know this is a big, big question or demand. But it
Mm.
just
Mm.
would be lovely if we can just kind of open that door or portal a bit, especially for all of the listeners also who haven't heard about descendant rising and what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the Inanna myth, for those who don't know, is an ancient Sumerian myth, and Sumerian culture, Sumeria is now modern day Iraq, and is sometimes referred to as the cradle of civilization because it's thought to be where the earliest peoples emerged from. And so it was found on clay tablets and was written by the world's first known poet, Enheduanna, who was a female priestess, probably of the culture. And it describes the oldest known telling of the goddess's descent to the underworld. And to descend to the underworld, firstly, she chooses to go. She chooses to go and meet her exiled sister, Ereshkigal, who is queen of the underworld. And Inanna is queen of the upper world, so she's queen of heaven and earth. And so she goes, and as she goes, she's stripped. She goes through 7 gates, and at each one she's stripped. Something is taken from her. And of course, she's a queen. She's not used to this. So at each gate, she says, "What is this?" And each time the same reply comes, "Quiet, Inanna. The ways of the underworld are perfect. They may not be questioned." And so she goes on, and she goes down through 7 gates. Now, Sylvia Brinton Pereira, who is a Jungian analyst, suggested that these 7 gates each are connected to 7 chakra points of the body. So the crown, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the solar plexus, the womb, and the vulva and roots. And this really resonated with me because I was quite a upright, heady child, let's say. And I fell in love with dance, but I fell in love with ballet, which for anyone who's ever done ballet is a very, very upright kind of, very encoded, quite brutal art form, actually. And it really spoke to my perfectionism, but also broke me because my body's not really made for ballet. And so I was in pursuit of this beauty from an outer aesthetic from as young as I can remember, and suffered for it. And eventually, once I left, I ended up going to contemporary dance school, and I left and I actually discovered yoga. And actually, yoga was the first time that my body actually began to open. And I think what had started to happen through the embodied spiritual practice that yoga is a descending back down into my roots. And I remember it was also a sexual awakening for me coming into a yoga practice. And it was a real descent down into an awakening of a spirituality inside of my own sexuality that I hadn't been in contact with before. For me, you talk about rebellion. I rebelled against religion, the institutionalized version, because it didn't resonate. I felt it was really oppressive. But in doing so, I disenfranchised myself from my own spirituality, like the nature of my nature. Is a spirituality is entwined with soul and spirit. And in my pushback, in my rebellion of God, as it were, I lost spirit. I lost that. I mean, I don't think I lost it, because I don't know if you do lose it. Like, do you? I think we are spirit, but I lost my there was some sort of pushback against it that prevented. I was too angry to be in relationship with it in a way where it could nourish me, let's say. And so Inanna is also a goddess of sexuality. And so I feel like the descent inevitably takes us down into our roots, and our roots is also our sexual selves. So my interest, really, I suppose one of the reasons this story spoke to me so deeply is because of its embodied nature, and because of the embodied way that I came to it through a woman, a beautiful teacher called Linda Hartley. And yeah, it just felt like my story. And of course, it can't be my story because it was born in ancient Sumeria over 5,000 years ago on the other side of the planet to where I'm from. And yet the archetypes inside of the story are very, very much alive in our lives here and now. And I think that's why so many people who come to the myth go, oh my gosh, that's my life. Like, how there's a resonance there that speaks to them. And that's the nature of archetype. Archetypal energies are those very common patterns that repeat and repeat and repeat through generations, through time. And they are energetic and they are alive in our flesh and bones. They're not just on a flat page. So I think that's why there's so much aliveness in this story and so many teachings in it that can nourish us here and now, 5,000 years later. And I mean, it's the continual teacher. It keeps teaching me. So yeah, how do we become naked again? And I think the beauty of this myth is that it gives us a structure to dissolve into. My teacher, Kim Rosen, speaks a lot and has taught me a lot about containers. And I don't think that we can dissolve as human beings without having some sort of container or witness to dissolve into. And so for me, this myth was, in a sense, it was like a cocoon that wrapped itself around me. So like the butterfly, and interestingly, I'd been learning a practice called butterfly for many years when I encountered it. It gave me that cocoon to dissolve into, and I turned into that mush of the caterpillar inside the cocoon. And then, of course, we emerge and transform and emerge with new form, whatever that looks like.
This is when you just said it gives us a structure, a container, or a witness to see, to dissolve into. Maybe you've written that as a book and I can't remember, but just hearing you say that, it brings tears to my eyes, Carly, because it lands somewhere. Just that very sentence hits a very deep desire. I can't think it, but I can feel it. And isn't that beautiful? My background is dance, and I had also learned ballet and Graham, and studied that, and it broke me, so I stopped. And the first thing which kind of saved me was a yoga workshop back in the wonderful yoga teacher, very inspired by Vandas Caravelli, which is all about feet and earth. Beautiful. And my home dance teacher said, just trust me, just come to the workshop. It will give you some ground. Maybe even that's what she had, I can't remember, but that's really what it gave me. And what you, gosh, that's where I discovered, you said your body opened. Yeah, I felt like I really met the ground. And since then, in whatever I practice, the ground is like rolling, melting. Ground is the thing. The down is, I first have to be with the down that I can then be with the up.
Yes.
And yeah, gosh, just that, just already knowing that. And I now think of all also women or listeners who are in a, very challenging, very deeply challenging or painful moment, knowing that there is a container or a structure where I can dissolve into. Wow. Really, it shakes something very deep in me.
Yeah.
Such a despair.
Yeah. Well, I feel like our culture doesn't provide that anymore.
Yes.
It feels to me like our culture calls it breakdown and then medicates it. And that medical practitioners, some are beautiful witnesses, but actually a lot of medical practitioners are really, really stretched, for one thing, because the system isn't supported well, in the UK at least. But also there's been a split between science and soulfulness, science and ceremony. And so in that void, in that splitting, only one part of the human is held in a medical model, really, unless you get a very soulful practitioner who is walking this path inside of the medical profession, which there are some, and I'm so grateful for the medical profession. Having said that, where is the container? Where are these? Because we need the language of soul, and you said earlier the wild poetry of the body. Who is holding a container for the wild mythopoetic journeys that we're going through that just get labeled breakdown or failure? And I think one of the things I say in the book that's really resonated with people is something like, when people think they're failing, they're often birthing.
Yes.
But we've lost the reverence and the trust of the birthing process, both physically and metaphorically, in this very secular culture. But our souls don't forget. Our souls remember that we need maps, we need mythopoetry, we need the wild poetry of the body to be heard and honored and loved and felt, because it has this deep wisdom inside it, this ancient wisdom inside that can emerge, but it needs us to go down. As you say, we have to go down to meet it. And for many people in this culture, it's very, very frightening to do that.
Gosh, thank you so much for saying that. How right, because it is in the very probably stillness, center of stillness within the breakdown. And
Yeah.
as osteopathy, we actually always meet the very stillness in the most kind of
Yeah.
tight part of the body. That's where the health is, in the very part which we could also call disease, right? But within the very breakdown is the coming together. But how so often in our world we focus only on the breakdown or only on the bodily
Yeah.
breakdown, and we actually we end up being cured but completely split and even more
Yes.
lost than we were in the beginning.
Yes.
And gosh, so maybe we can go exactly there a bit deeper. And I made that note. I don't know if it was in other podcast I've listened with you, or if it was in the book, but you talk about the war of Inanna and Ishkagal in ourselves, and how we meet. And I wonder if that is a good thing because through the Inanna Ishkagal or descent and rising lens, what happens when we think we break down, or how can we rewrite that narrative of the breakdown, or understand what is happening, and therefore meet it differently.
So I'm going to read a quote here that is in the book, that I actually opened this morning. I was just like, I'm always curious to see what page just opens. Maybe it's quite a long excerpt, but I feel like I opened it there for a reason.
That's right.
So in Stephen Cope's book, The Great Work of Your Life, he looks at the necessity of the life-death life cycle. The whole book is devoted to exploring the notion of dharma, or a calling in life. And this is his quote. Our understanding of dharma today is obscured by our fondness for the cult of personality and for self and celebrity. Our understanding is obscured by the narcissism of our time. The primary distortion in my Dharma life has been the age-old misery of self-absorption. Deep in midlife, I had begun to feel the awful burden of wanting to be special, wanting to be better, want to experience every possible adventure in life. As Cope names, we want everything, and Ereshkigal is there to teach us that that is not possible. This yearning to be special and have everything can actually block the flow of life. To let go of the upper world cult of the individual and admit that we are just like everyone else. This is a key teaching found in the losses of our heart. We are unique, yes, but we are also ordinary. So Ereshkigal takes our breastplate, and with it the part of us that wants to transcend the ordinary in an attempt to supersede our own impermanence. In this she is ruthless. Whether we survive or not is inconsequential to her. In nature there is no separation between life and death. They are necessarily and unequivocally entwined. Whether we die or live, we will be composted into the whole. I realize now in many ways, Ereshkigal's indifference is the greatest love we can be offered. In my experience, loving presence is a willingness to be alongside another or ourselves, even in the face of death or suffering. Therefore, in the absence of Ereshkigal's presence, something within us is allowed to go. This path asks us to face ourselves again and again, layer by layer, so that we can breed compassion to the deepest depths of our being. The root of the word compassion is compati, from the Latin that means to suffer with. It is rarely easy. So for me, that's why we resist Ereshkigal. This is why Inanna and Ereshkigal are at war, because in a way, what we've been encouraged to do by the current culture is to keep going towards the light, towards being special, avoid death, avoid aging, inject your face with loads of stuff, pretend that you can stay young forever, fly to the moon, all of these upward and upward and upward, these sky god, what would be represented in the myth as the sky god mentality, the elevated masculine that wants to stay above ground. And Inanna is the daughter of that. She is the daughter of, she is the father's daughter, the father in this sense being like the quintessential patriarchal upper world daughter. And so she, in order to be that, she has to exile Ereshkigal on some level. She has to put that part of herself, the more chthonic, fecund, unruly, earthy parts, into the underworld. So I know a lot of your listeners do menstruality work, and I think this is, for this, an example, a real life example of this could be the way that we override our menstrual cycle, or a pot on the pill just because we have a few spots when we're a teenager, and then end up being on the pill for many, many, many years, and never being in contact with our cyclical wisdom. That would be a version of dissociating from Ereshkigal, or the way that we are encouraged into more pornographic, performative form of sexuality with our partners, so that we're performing our way through our sexual relationships rather than really letting that wild poetry of orgasm come through our bodies and animate us in a way that we couldn't even imagine. That's a way that we exile Ereshkigal, or not allowing something that needs to die in our life, be it an idea of self, a job, a relationship, an idealized self-image that we thought we wanted to be and keep striving for, rather than being who we really are. That's the way that we keep Ereshkigal in the underworld. So these things create conflict and a war inside of us. It's a violence to ourselves to keep pushing away our organic nature in favor of an externalized, idealized version of who we should be from the outside in. And the descent is when Ereshkigal and Inanna meet. It isn't a loving sisterly reunion. She stakes Inanna with a meat hook and hangs her on the wall to rot. Something in us needs to be staked here. It has to be. And in a sense, it seems very violent, but I'm just thinking now as I'm speaking, I'm kind of thinking out loud. It's kind of where we see for the first time our own violence. Because we don't recognize how violent it is to override the menstrual cycle our entire lives, to never rest, to constantly be going, to constantly be seeking. That is a form of violence. It's a form of war against our beautiful bodies. And it's praised. We get praised for it.
I just had this, it's so helpful for those examples you just brought, Carly. That's so helpful. And I just, I had another wave of goosebumps. Yeah, absolutely. I suffered from eating disorder for a long time. And just what you just said, that violence, yes. Gosh, at the core of that, I found the hatred and the violence, I found all of that against myself, right? The greatest pain was to wake up after, in the last phase of my recovery, my doctor said, and you are depressed. And I said, I felt, no, I'm not depressed. I'm just waking up to I was waking up to all to the violence, to the war I had maintained in myself. And that was the most painful part of it, to kind of suddenly, I could see it through loving eyes, but I just really, your words just, met exactly my bodily experience. And I share it because I know I'm not alone I'm not alone with that story. So, thank you both of us for naming that.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because, so many women come to my circles and share that they've had eating disorders, and I'm sure that piece, I just got whole body goosebumps when you said it, because I can really feel it. And to recognize our own violence, it's, as you say, I'm awakening. I'm awakening to my own violence.
Yeah.
And unless we can see it, we will keep doing it, right?
Yes.
We will.
So am I right to if I apply the through the descent rising lens? Yes, that is sort of eating for me, for anyone who goes through that, can be a path to fully descend, right? Because and for someone else it might be a burnout, or it might be a loss, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff. I'm not sure. It's yeah. What is it? It is that kind of oscillating water which gradually brought me further down and down and down until there was no further down anymore, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's also not for granted that we rise, but
No.
Yes.
Mm.
But I think it is so helpful what I really want to, or I wish we can all take from us to, if we, I wish we all just in that very moment awaken just 1%, 1% to that violence and war against ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because that can happen on a big scale, and it happens very small and silently so often. Mm-hmm.
But it really changes us from the inside. And this is why I'm so committed to this work, because when I look at the world right now, there's so much othering of, oh, it's them over there. And to keep catching that in myself of, oh, where does that distorted human being expression of human energy that I'm seeing out there in the world that is so painful to me, where does that live in me? Because all of the archetypes that are around and alive right now, that I'm thinking of, Donald Trump, that kind of warmongering separatist kind of viewpoint exists also in myself. And though it's really hard to meet with those parts, if we do, then we are taking responsibility for that inside of ourselves on a day-to-day basis in each of our interactions to whatever extent we can. And we will therefore change something in our small pool. And if everybody took responsibility for doing their work in this, the change would be massive, actually. It's so easy to feel very disempowered at this time, but I think taking responsibility for our own violence, which for many females is acted inwards quicker than it's acted outwards. And for some men too, but for women, I think it's a very, very common pattern that we act our violence inwards. Once we decide to stop doing that to ourselves, we really embody something different, and that is felt.
Yeah, now I think again to that Instagram post, which I kept reading 5 times, because exactly right, it's such a horrendous world, and we could dissociate. If we don't ask that question, then I might completely dissociate. But the moment I ask that question, where do I live that in myself, or where that is a very, I think you mean that in a very bodily and somatic way, right?
Yes.
We might feel the first response might not be a real experience or a worded sentence. It might be also a sensation, a feeling of a black hole somewhere. And in that moment, I am coming home, because you write a lot in the book. You say to descend is to arrive with our senses.
Yes. Yes.
And for me, that's exactly what happens in that moment. Is if I see that crazy thing which on one level I want to push away, but if I ask, where is that alive in myself? I immediately feel I tap into, wow, what is my immediate, what do I feel, sense in my body when I read and see that, into which kind of so far uncovered inner landscape does that bring
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was something else. Wow. Yeah.
There's a beautiful book called The Devil You Know, by a woman called Gwen Adshead. She's done a lot of work. It's called, the subheading is Encounters in Forensic Psychiatry, and she's done a lot of work in Broadmoor Prison here in the UK. And for me, it's actually a book of stories of empathy, of the power of empathy to heal. And there are a series of stories of clients that she's worked with, or patients she's worked with, and these are people who have killed people, who have committed some of the worst crimes. And she tells the story of how human connection can help them awaken to both what they've done and bring consciousness and healing. And it's a phenomenal book. But one of the things I really took from it was, she talks about violence like a bike lock, a combination lock. And she said, we all have this combination lock inside of us. But for some of us, life will present to us exactly the right or wrong circumstances for that final number on the bike lock to fit into place, that we flip into a violence on the outside or inside, perhaps in psychosis, where we lose it. But her point is, we all have the combination. It's just that some of us, life circumstances presents us with a place where we go and the extra click goes into place to send us over beyond. And I love it, because what she's saying is the most dangerous place is to believe we don't have that combination inside of us, because then we are always making the violent one the other. And I think to recognize that we all have the capacity to go to these places allows us to stop disowning our own violence, however that shows up, and actually really start to go, wow, there's empathy there. And one thing about descending is, it is in the underworld that empathy grows. And it is also in the underworld that true compassion grows. So to descend, though it feels like an incredibly lonely, bleak, desolate place, actually it's where real connections eventually are forged, both with ourselves and with others. And it's not what we would believe when we're there in the fetal position thinking we can't go on. But out of that fetal position, some other possibility is birthed.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think, wow, there is, each time, there is, so from my own experience, there is this unconditional connection, and I would say there's actually this unconditional love awaiting us, because somewhere deep down there is that. I talk a lot with my inner child. I'm all kinds of older and younger selves, right? And I feel it's there where I meet. Yeah, I think very often, where I meet that 11-year-old Florina, I've so forcefully, right? That's again that violence pushed away, and all those years she wanted to connect, right? She kept screaming, why can't, what else does need to happen that you finally just take me the way I am, fully naked also. So the moment I descend, and I meet first and foremost her pain, her anger, her disappointment, but also I meet that unconditional love from her to me, and just my ability to actually love unconditional. It sounds so poetic, but it's so, I so mean that. I so mean that.
Yeah, beautiful.
And there I have a question, Carly, about something I'm sometimes struggle to understand. So I think, wow, then many other listeners will as well. With all that is what we've spoken now, maybe the themes or the experiences or the trauma or the wounding we meet in the underworld, so often we talk about our dark sides, or the dark feminine, or the darkness. Is that what we mean with with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel like we have to be really. What I love about this story and this work is it's about holding the nuance and complexity and paradoxical truths. And so I definitely feel like, and I talk a lot in the book about how going to the underworld is meeting with our trauma and meeting with what I call the embodied subconscious. So implicit memories that are held in our flesh and our bones, in our energy systems that replay in ways that we don't even realize. But I don't think that the dark feminine or the dark itself is only our trauma and shadow.
Yeah, you're right.
Because what I really love is to recognize actually that the vastness of the dark is the womb of everything, if you like.
It is the love.
It is the love. The darkness is the love. And so how do we to confine it to only being our shadow again is to undermine or to narrow down the dark into being quite one-dimensional, actually. And actually the dark is everything. Rilke says it so beautifully. Darkness pulls in everything, fires, people, animals, and myself, how easily it gathers them, powers and people. It's like the dark is the first thing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's a wonderful conversation and question, right? Twice the light, Probably trauma more often happens actually in the light, in the very, So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the constant pursuit of light is really horrifically traumatic. There's a tree across the road from my house and it's under a constant street light, and it makes me feel so claustrophobic when I see it because it never gets dark. Never.
Gosh. I feel for the tree. Gosh.
Yeah. And I really crave that complete darkness.
It's interesting, I think I asked this question because I'm playing with, so I know your map of descendant rising, and then I'm playing with my very, very physical map of descending into the darkness of my womb. And I almost like, wow, for me, that's almost a prerequisite, If I can descend into my physical body, then I build the ground, or I think I noticed that right now, then I have the kind of, doch, somehow the capability, I built my own also kind of container or inner tribe that I can go and face that even deeper descent.
Yeah.
If you still have time, in the beginning you said descent roots is our sexual self, and how on your journey you found, I just wrote spirituality in my own sexuality. And I know that also recently you've done lots of wonderful work and offerings, and I believe circles, workshops, and retreats with women around that. And I'd love to ask you actually first and foremost, what do you mean with sexual self? Because it's not even just that I'm not sure how many I've never a lot actually explored that, or just kind of wrote or spoke, or what's our sexual self?
Yeah.
What is that?
So when we were talking about the split earlier, the split between Inanna and Ereshkigal is also for me a physical expression of eros wounding. And eros wounding, when it shows up in our bodies and in our lives, tends to show up as a split between what we think we should be and what we actually are, what is actually arising inside of us. And so in a very pornified culture, this is really exaggerated because obviously we're fed hypersexualized images a lot of the time, and from an increasingly young age now, that kind of hijacks our emergent sexuality before it's come to fruition. And then we begin to emulate what we see from the outside in, rather than allowing our sexual self, that being our erotic energy. And Eros in its original form is our primordial life force energy. So not just sex, not only sex, but our entire creative life force energy. And so when we are living in this pornified culture, what happens to that emergent, creative, sacred spark? And so for me, what happens when we descend is we stop looking to the outer for the rules and the ways and the shapes and the sounds that we should be making. And we go back inside the body and we dare to listen for that which wants to emerge from the deepest roots of ourselves. And many people never go there because they are too afraid, because the trauma of, I mean, a lot of people don't even realize they're split off from that because they've never felt that emergent energy coming through their bodies. They've never allowed orgasm to emerge through from the cervix or from the depths of the womb, from a place of pleasure that is utterly surrendered and lets go. And for women, that's incredibly important because science now has shown us that in order for women to experience depth orgasm, that the amygdala and the parts of the brain that are vigilant for safety, have to go quiet. Woman has to, in a woman's brain, we have to let go of that vigilance, that sort of outer looking part, in order to be really overcome, literally, by orgasmic energy. And that's not the same for men. So the performative nature of sexuality that we're sold is actually the antithesis of depth orgasm and the emergence of our sexual self in an organic, untamed way. And that's really where my work is sitting now, is how do I, well, it's where it's always sat, but I'm really honing in now to that point of how do I hold spaces for people where they can find safety in self enough to really get curious about, wow, what does that mean for me? How will that sound for me? How will that feel for me? How will that orchestrate me? Because it's not you doing, it's a surrender, which is the very nature of descending energy. And what's so fascinating is that oxytocin, which is the love hormone, earlier you were talking about unconditional love. When oxytocin is released into the body, it's actually released in the brain and it cascades down through the body. It's a descending energy. Love is a descending energy. And to be doused in that, and then once it's descended through, the spirit of orgasm rises and ripples out in all directions. And we can't know how that's going to happen. So descent and rising is the nature of sexual energy. It's the nature of it. And that rebirths us many, many times in a lifetime. It's healing energy. It's beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah, this absolutely. Like, I did know that it comes from, but of course, yeah, it's such a wow. The oxytocin wave is descending, and I loved. It's so good what you say, how to also realize that, wow, it's this primordial life force. I'm so fascinated by our physical body, very beginning, by the ovum, the egg cell, the conceptus, the embryo, and that is pure primordial life force.
Yes.
And it starts right there, deep down.
Yes.
in our wombs, and all of us, we hold, I think that there is this double thing happening there. We have that, as women, we have that ability, gift, sacredness, to over and over again experience that descent and rising through orgasm. And at the same time, we have that incredible container of, for 9 months, witnessing, nurturing, holding that primordial life force becoming life.
Yeah.
I think also, just that fact is,
Yeah. And this
And
is why, in a way, this is why, this, though this myth can absolutely speak to men, this is a feminine mystery. This is a mythopoetic map of the feminine for exactly the reasons you've just said. It's really encoded into the female body in a way that is very different to men, and that's not better, it's just different. And it's been undermined and denigrated in our culture that the male has been sold as better, and that women must become more like man and the masculine in order to be. Whereas actually, what I love about this map is it really consecrates the beauty, mystery, and potency of the feminine, of feminine energy. And it also describes how the masculine and feminine can come into new relationship together. So it's both and, not either or. But I feel like in a culture that has really denigrated the feminine and the beauty and sacredness of feminine energy, this map, this story, really brings those ancient roots of the feminine and the necessity for that wisdom right home. It's a homecoming to the feminine mysteries, and the way that the masculine supports and helps and holds or thwarts that.
Absolutely, a homecoming to the mysteries of the feminine, and it's so softly rebellious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's a big, but I ask this for me and for all listeners with what you just said now about our, let's call it, the true deepest sexual self. How can we, all of us, how can we begin to uncover, or what's on our, would you, I'm asking for exercise practice, no, but what can be because it can be, it's like I feel in myself also, wow, we hold lots of also kind of, not disgust, but maybe a bit shame is the word. Shame on with that whole topic. But what can be a way to start to explore that more freely, to see, wow, I so loved when you said, how is it orchestrating me? I was thinking of, wow, of all those moments when we just work on our own, right? Just touch, stroke our whole body, not only genitals, but
Yeah. So I think you steered away from the word disgust there, as well as shame. But actually, I feel like disgust is something that many, many women I work with need to meet first, if it's there. So for me, in order to allow something to fully allow erotic energy to fully orchestrate us, we have to meet with whatever is in the way of that first. And that might be disgust. That might be fear. That might be shame. That might be old trauma or abuse. And I think many people come to this work thinking, oh, well, if I'm going in pursuit of pleasure, the journey should be pleasurable. And the descent teaches us that that's not the case, and that if you're meeting with disgust and all you can feel is disgust and disgust and disgust, then that's what needs to be met. Like, where is that coming from? How does it feel? What is it stopping in your body? How does it, and if you really express it, if you let the tongue stick out, if you let the sounds of disgust come out, and you let them come, and you let the emotion attached to them come, and you let the physical movements attached to them come, something else can reveal itself. So really this descent and rising map is the map of us coming down to our sexual selves, because what it's saying is whatever is there when you take off the crown, when you take off the breastplate, when you take off the gold bangles, when you take off the robes, that is what must be met first. And then pleasure will come, and then love will come, and then whatever else might come. But it can't come if we're avoiding the thing that's right here in front of us. So whatever that is, we have to meet it. And it's not always possible to do that alone. Yeah. So when you ask the question, like, what do we need? I would say witnessing. A core teaching of this myth is the requirement, the essential need for a witness. And yes, we all have an internal witness, but oftentimes these parts you're speaking to, that the shamed parts, they're covered, and we can't witness them because we've survived by not witnessing them, right? We've survived by putting them into the dark. So it can be very difficult to witness what's in our own blind spot, because it's our blind spot. And we all have these, and I have had loads of them, and still I'm working through them and will be until I die. So just for any practitioners out there, I think it can become a real practitioner kind of whole sacred cow of like, oh, I've done it, I can't have any more blind spots. Well, actually, you've got loads, just like all of us. So we have to have witnesses. And I have two incredibly important spiritual teachers and a supervisor for my therapy work. And I also have friends and women that I work with and sit with in circle who are witnesses for me, and my partner who is a witness for me, and I would not be without them. What I see in the circles that I hold also is the way women and men, but I mainly work with women, so speaking to women right now, the way women's bodies help other women's bodies remember. Women are inherently collaborative. And again, part of this war between Ereshkigal and Inanna is not only the split from the feminine on the inside, but it's the split in female relationships and beholding each other on the outside. So for me, women's circles are a place where another container where we can come together as women and help each other remember what we've forgotten, remember what we've been severed from. And then the Naked Power weekend that it wasn't a weekend, there was a weekend intensive as part of a longer course that I hold with Jacqueline Luan. We saw in those 3 days together, when we were in person together, how women's bodies, the women remembered how to move and allow that erotic energy through their bodies because they were mirroring each other. And it wasn't because disgust or pain or trauma or resistance or rage didn't come up. It's because all those things did come up. And when they came up, the women were like, oh God, we needed to say that. And then something else came through. So it was like, how can we create containers where whatever is here, the most taboo thing, the most unspeakable thing, the most unexpressible thing, even like really taking pleasure in your own breasts and body, cannot be allowed. Sometimes that's the edge, right? A container where everything is welcome, that we can descend into and let something orchestrate us. And we find that safety by risking ourselves by walking through the door. And then by saying yes to what's there inside of us, be that resistance or a wholehearted yes, and anything in between, moment by moment while we're there. So for anyone listening to this, I have a day immersion coming up at Samhain with Melissa Mayer in London, which is going to include breath work, which is one of my most treasured practices. And I'm so delighted to be holding it, because if we breathe fully, erotic energy flows. And then Jacqueline and I are holding our Naked Power container again next March. And we would love any women listening to this who feel called to join us, because yeah, I mean, the book is a witness, and this conversation and the work you're doing is, but I think in-person connection is just so invaluable. And I really encourage, if you don't come to one of my containers, find some group of women nearby you, or group of men, or group of people, souls who want to work with this, and dive in with them, because it's a really beautiful, real beauty can emerge through witnessing each other.
Yeah, sharing both, or answering my question. And again, I could feel it's so wonderful. All you say, I can feel the response in my body, and I could feel how just you telling me how those women dare to give space to all of that, how that liberation underneath, I could feel that liberation in my own body. So yeah, 100%. And I was about to ask you, how can listeners work with you?
And I also have some online conversations that I recorded when I launched the book that are free on my website. And also for women, we haven't touched on rest, but for anybody listening to this, descent often comes with burnout and fatigue. So there's an Inanna Yoga Nidra that's free with my mailing list. Sign up as well. That Yoga Nidra was a really important practice in my own descent, and can be a really beautiful holding for resting while we're in the underworld, because it takes a hell of a lot of energy to be down there.
Thank you for naming that and linking to that resource.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Speak for hours and hours, but we're going to provide a wonderful temporary now. I get lots of emails saying, can we have a part 2? And that's often what happens.
Oh. Well, my new book's coming out next June, so please do have me back. I would love to chat to you again. It's been such a pleasure.
I would love to kind of be part of that as a, part of the book launch, and a launching episode. That would be fantastic. I'd love that.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carly, for sitting with me, for recording this conversation with me, for you, dear listener. And thank you, dear listener, for sticking around until the very end, and for showing up for yourself and for all of us over and over again. Your presence is really nurturing this community, and I say that very often. The Soft Rebellion is a conversation between all of us. And if you enjoyed this conversation, then please leave a review, follow this podcast. You can't imagine of how much a support that is if I receive podcast reviews. You can always also send me an email, softrebellion@florinatali.com, or tag me on social media, florina.tali. I would love to hear your takeaways and your questions arising from this conversation. I would love to hear how this is all landing with you, and from what you want more or less or the same. And as always, if you can think of a friend, of a woman, of a person, he, she, they, who you think, wow, that's what they need to hear, then please forward this conversation to them. I'm looking forward to be with you again soon, and until then, big love.